Whether it's bad planning, bad luck, bad timing, or bad inventions, well-intentioned bad decisions have plagued history for thousands of years. Welcome to Historic Hindsight. Hello and welcome to another episode of Historic Hindsight. I'm John, that's Tom, and today we're going to talk to you about the Kentucky Derby.
Where did you even get the Kentucky Derby from? Paul Revere's ride. Horse racing. It is horse racing, yeah.
Was this not the beginning of horse racing?
It could be. And
the very first?
And we're releasing this on the 4th of July, so happy 4th of July and happy 4th of July celebrations.
That's why happy birthday, America.
Yeah, yes. Johnny and I went in completely different directions.
Yeah, I thought
for today.
For the birth of the nation, you might dress up for such an occasion, make a good impression, and you decided to
go the opposite way.
Go the other way with that. So, but that's the beauty of America. We're free to go whichever way we want.
Yes, so what we're actually doing, children, is listen, my children, and you shall hear the midnight ride of Israel Bissell, because Paul Revere's bullshit, and we're going to dispel all the myths about Paul Revere and his
Bissell?
midnight ride. Yeah, Israel Bissell is the guy who should get more of the credit.
The vacuum cleaner guy?
Yeah, it could be. It could be.
So I know the ride of Paul Revere. This is history that's been taught forever. So why are we bothering with this? Because he rode and warned the Americans that the British were coming and saved the United States and won the Declaration of Independence or something.
Yeah,
right?
you pretty much summed up what we're taught in school, at least in American schools, what we're taught.
That's what I learned.
Yeah, it's complete and total garbage, and most of
like
what
it never happened.
People rode and people warned.
Okay.
But the whole story behind it and why and how and aftermath is not at all what we hear in that famous poem.
Are you claiming that our history may have been embellished to make it look more dramatic or better?
I think I had a bug on me. Yes, just a scotch, Johnny. So if you don't know Paul Revere, he was a silversmith prior to the war. And by being a silversmith, by that I mean he actually ran his daddy's company after his daddy died, almost into the ground, which is why he becomes a patriot, because he blames his poor management of the silver company on taxes by the British crown, and so that ruined his company. Not maybe.
Now was that because the British was taxing? They were taxing everything, right?
All part of the whole Stamp Acts, all that stuff.
Everything was okay.
Yeah.
And so instead of him just being bad at his job and being a silver spoon in his mouth.
Quite literally.
So instead of him running into the ground, he found somebody to blame and did something about it.
Yes, sure.
It's the American way.
Now, at the time, Paul Revere was, at the time of 1775, we're talking about the night of April 18th into the morning of April 19th. This is when the ride happens. So at that time, Paul Revere is actually relatively famous and popularized mostly by his etching and engraving of the Boston Massacre. So that propaganda piece that spread across all newspapers in the colonies.
And that's etching on silver, or like a silver etch?
I believe it started as like a silver plate, and then of course it gets printed.
Okay, so that's the press he made.
Yeah, he's famous for that.
Now, I'm sorry, and maybe you said this. What year are we in? We're April
1775. So this is before. And it's an important note. This is before the Declaration of Independence. This is before the colonies have started a war.
Am I thinking of a different thing?
I think you're thinking of Cage, Nicolas Cage's movie. Yeah,
that wasn't a documentary on Paul Revere? Okay.
Mm-mm.
Well, therein lies my confusion.
There you go. And he was occasionally used to relay messages, although most of the colonists tended to avoid him for this role because he was loud, flamboyant, and tended to attract attention wherever he went because he's Paul Revere.
Isn't that a bit of his job? Was he was like a crier of sorts?
Yeah,
or was he supposed to deliver private messages?
Yeah, these are
bursting into town saying, "Hey, everybody, look what I got!"
Yeah, that's the first part of the big myth about the whole ride. Is this was in secret? This was a private message.
He wasn't rolling in, screaming off at the top of his lungs, or shouldn't have been.
At least shouldn't have been. Yeah. Now, on April 7th, 1775, we have a Joseph Warren who received word that the British may be moving on Massachusetts in the provincial Congress, as you know, they were, talking about the whole war thing, and not liking the crown, and maybe wanting just, to rebel against the said crown, and that they were talking about getting rid of all the rebellious activities by getting rid of the arms and munitions that the provincial Massachusetts Congress was sitting on a huge store of guns and gunpowder and munitions.
And so they think that the British wanted that. I mean, this makes sense that they would want that, I suppose. Yeah.
And they were sitting there on Concord, which is where the Congress was in Concord. So on April 14th, British General Thomas Gage actually did receive orders, which were laughingly sent to him on the 27th of January.
Wait, hold up.
It took 3 months.
They were sick. From where?
I'm assuming
South Africa?
I'm assuming it came from England, but still, that's a lot. Seems like a bit much for orders from the crown.
Didn't we? Yeah, I don't know.
But his orders were...
I guess, in 17, not much travels fast.
Yeah. So he was ordered to disarm the rebels and find their hiding guns in Concord, which is where they were believed to be held, and to arrest specifically Samuel Adams and John Hancock, as they were two of the heads of this whole rebellious movement.
Beer guy?
Beer guy. Yeah, the beer guy. Yeah, Samuel Adams. Yeah, beer guy. Yeah.
And he was mixed up in all this?
Yeah, he's mixed up. He's one of those. All
right, so they're coming for some warrants and contraband. Essentially,
warrants and contraband.
They're gonna kick down the doors of Concord and arrest everyone inside and take the weapons and ammo.
Yep. So Gage was given discretion on the orders, however, and so he ordered his men, and I quote, "with utmost expedition and secrecy to Concord, where you will seize and destroy all military stores, but you will take great care to the soldiers to not plunder and any of the inhabitants or hurt private property." So he's telling the British soldiers, hey, go take the guns, go take the military equipment that can be used, but leave private property alone.
And they're like, wait,
don't
why
mess with people's houses.
Hold up. Why are we doing things so out of the ordinary now? Like, why aren't we allowed to do our normal raping and pillaging? What gives, guys?
However, he did not, in writing at least, order the arrests of anyone, because his fear would be that if he ordered the arrests in writings and those orders fall into the wrong hands, malicious hands, then that would be spur for the militia to get a little bit hostile,
rowdy,
a little bit more rowdy than just taking their guns. So,
so there's verbal orders, I would assume.
Yes, but these orders are given on April 14th, and it's still going to be 4 more days before anything's actually done, because apparently things move super fast in 1775.
I mean, no one was in a hurry. Where did they have to go?
Right?
How could they get there? You walk or you take a horse?
Yeah, or a boat up a river. But yeah, walk.
Okay, yeah, sure. If you're well-to-do, I suppose.
But by this time, Johnny, those orders were kind of well moot because they were already secured because Joseph Warren knew on April 7th that there were issues and had already on April 7th started the work in motion to get the guns moved from Concord into various locations in outside cities. So
he broke it up and sent it to different areas that even if one still gets hit, it's not the whole.
Yeah, which should have been what was done to begin with. You shouldn't have all your military stores in one location if you're a rebel army. That's just stupid.
Well, this would probably happen before the phrase "don't put all your eggs in one basket" came about. And so nobody had that wisdom, Tommy. So
you're right. So leading up to the British movements, there was some concern that the leaders' well-being was still in danger because they might be getting arrested, and maybe they don't know that the British were on the move. So this is where the whole idea of warn the leadership before the British move out, or as the British move out, warn the leadership so they can get out of where they're hiding up at.
Okay.
So days before the 18th, Revere did instruct a Robert Newman, who was the sexton of the North Church, to send a signal by lantern to alert the colonists in Charleston of any movements by British troops. So basically, if you see the British moving out in more than 50 people, light some candles, let us know what's going on.
So this is the one if by land, two if by sea.
This is your one if by land,
deal?
two if by sea. Yes, this did happen. It is one if by land, two if by sea. But what did not happen is Paul Revere was not waiting on the other side of the river for said lanterns. He did not get in a boat and row across the river when he saw said lanterns, because the lanterns weren't to warn him; they were to warn the city itself, not of Charleston, that the British were moving. So, so all the militiamen.
So this was like a local ordinance.
Yeah. All the militiamen
get in your houses, buckle down, board up, whatever.
Yeah. All the local militiamen knew to look at the church, and if the candles came up in the church, all right, to arms, guys, we're going up.
We're good. Okay.
So between 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. on the 18th, Joseph Warren is going to tell Paul Revere, and a William Dawes that he had intel that the British were planning on moving out that night, and to go and warn Hancock and Samuel Adams that the British were moving to arrest them. And go ahead and go
get out of here. Find
somewhere to hide. Said specifically that this mission must be in utmost secrecy, as there were curfews in place and there were British patrols in place and checkpoints on the road. So you weren't supposed to be out past a certain hour, and you definitely weren't supposed to be out past a certain hour, on a horseback running, hooting and hollering. So hence, don't fucking hoot and holler. So this isn't Sarah Palin's, he was riding on that horse and ringing them bells and shooting them guns to the British that they're not going to take our guns and their freedoms.
He who warned the British that they weren't going to be taking away our arms by ringing those bells and making sure as he's riding his horse through town to send those warning shots and bells that we were going to be secure and we were going to be free.
Yeah, that shit. Yeah, he was doing that.
She did that. She did.
I'm gonna put that clip up because that clip is hilarious. Because that was
the
stupidest when she was running for vice president. Anyways,
I miss those days, to be honest.
Yeah, I do too. That
quaint.
That most definitely did not, in fact, happen. They were already on their way before those candles were lit in the bell tower. Those candles were lit for a whole whopping, I think it was 1 to 5 minutes. It was very brief time, just enough to give a signal across.
And so what was the ride for then? You said there was a ride.
The ride, those two, Paul Revere and Dawes were sent out to warn Hancock and Samuel Adams that they could be being arrested because of
them
British
specifically.
Yes, those two. And they were. It wasn't just Paul Revere. There was Dawes as well, because if one person gets captured along the way, which was expected, at least you have this backup.
Yeah. It's having what's that called?
Contingency plan.
Sure. Yeah, that's not what I was thinking of, but yeah, we'll go with that because I'm not going to think of it.
There's actually an estimated up to as many as 40 riders that actually got sent out through the countryside, because what happened is the ride itself, Paul Revere did set out and did go town to town, from Somerville to Medford and then to Arlington and to Lexington. He did move along that route.
Redundancy
While
was the
going
word.
there, he would stop off at known militiamen's houses and give them a heads up that, hey, to arms, the British are coming. Except he didn't say the British are coming.
Why? Yeah,
because they're all fucking British at this point. There hasn't been a declaration. There isn't America. They're not considering themselves colonial.
The us are coming.
British. The us are coming.
The bad we, though, the bad version of us,
the ones that we don't want. What was actually said is that the regulars are on the move is pretty much what or the regulars are coming out was pretty much the phrases that were used. Because that makes sense, because the regulars are referring to the actual British military. Regulars, right. The colonial military is considered the militia at this point. So,
yeah, but how do you build national pride around that quote? I mean, it's got to be something. But you have to have a direct enemy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you gotta have
the British.
The British just sounds better in the.
You write that
poem.
History, and it sounds a whole lot better.
The British are coming sounds a lot better in a poem written almost 100 years later. Anyways, as he wrote, almost 100 years later from this poem. But anyways, so as he rode, others would get on their horses and start spreading the word as well. Hence the upwards of 40 riders that night.
Yeah, because there was a whole this was a conglomerate of people that would do that. It was okay, we're gonna start. One goes here, and then 4 go out from there, and then 4 more from there, or whatever, and it grows, and you get the message out fast. How many did you say there were? There were
upwards of 40 known riders. Yeah,
40 riders.
Yeah,
and so we know Paul Revere because he had the longest and most important ride, or the hardest, or.
Sure, we'll go with that. Revere is going to arrive in Lexington around midnight with William Dawes, close behind him about 30 minutes later. They're going to meet at John Hancock's relative's home, the Hancock-Clark home, where they're going to find John Hancock and Samuel Adams. They're going to spend the next little bit over the next hour discussing a plan of action. Hancock and Adams rightfully think that it's a bit excessive to send 500 plus British to just arrest those two. So they don't think the goal is to arrest them. They think their goal is to go after the guns and munitions, which they are
because 500 people would be overkill.
Yeah, they are, and they are right in that assumption. They're right in that assumption. So they send Dawes and Paul Revere back down to Concord to get the guns and warn them. While all of this is going on, I have to mention a Samuel Prescott, who's a doctor of the time, who happened upon the Hancock-Clark house around 1 a.m. while he was returning from a lady's friend's house at 1 o'clock in the morning. This dude was totally having the illicit affair. Just happened to
I'm sorry, you said he was a doctor.
Yeah, okay.
She
house call.
clearly
House call.
was having night sweats.
Yeah, house call.
Whether they were before or after he arrived is hearsay, and we don't need to investigate that. But he was treating her for night sweats.
Night sweats, yep. And as he's returning home, he comes across the Hancock Clark house, sees Samuel Adams, John Hancock, Prescott, and Dawes, and decides, hey, listen, this sounds like fun. How can I be a part of this? So they're like, why?
What even was the world back then? Who just walks around, like, he was probably drunk.
Oh, I guarantee you.
Coming home at 1 a.m. and just sees people, and he's like, oh, you know what? I'm going to go be a part of that.
Yeah, and he was a part of that. And they're like, hey, you can help ride too. So they set off to go to Concord to warn the militia that in Concord to arm up and to get rid of the guns, all that fun stuff,
Yeah.
On their way to Concord, they will not make it because they are initially armed and detained by the local British patrols.
Armed and detained, like their guns taken? Is that what that means?
They were detained. Their arms were detained. All that fun stuff. So on their way to the Concord, they get picked up by British patrol. Dawes and Prescott are actually smart enough to escape. Prescott just jumps his horse over a wall.
He's just like, I'm just gonna run, see if they chase me.
Yeah.
Let's see what happens.
Dawes hightails it back the way he came, and Revere just like, you got me.
Well, what are you gonna do?
Prescott,
win some, you lose some.
Yeah, Prescott is actually going to make his way to Concord. He's going to be the only one of the three riders that actually makes it into Concord to successfully warn Concord. Dawes is going to have his horse get bucked from his horse, and then he's going to say, screw it, and he goes home.
That's enough for me. So he's not the type to get kicked off a horse and get back up on it and keep going. He's like, you know what? Maybe that's a sign. Maybe I don't need to be doing this right now.
Yeah. But at this point, it's all a moot point because what's actually been initiated is a series of actions called the Arm and Muster, or the Arm to Muster. And what that means is once the lights of the candles were lit and people started getting up and moving around, and once Samuel Adams and John Hancock were warned, Arm and Muster went into effect, this is where Sarah Palin wasn't completely wrong. This is where guns are fired in the air, bells are rung city to city, and drums are banged to warn local militias up to 25 miles away. The Arm and Muster order went out, and cities up to 25 miles away were ringing bells, shooting muskets in the air. That was quick.
That had to have been eerie
and terrifying for the British.
For everybody involved. Like, you might just sitting in your house and then you're hearing just drums and bells and alarms, gunshots, and just everything going off loud as can be. And you know what that means. That means people are coming. Like, it's great to have a warning system, but you still don't know how many. Is it going to work? Like, what are they going to just come in and start lighting fire to our village? Because that's what they did.
You're not. Yeah, they did. Yeah, you're definitely not far off because that's going to happen later in this episode. So Revere, while he is detained, he is going to be a good patriot and keep his mouth shut. And by keep his mouth shut, I'm going to say that what actually happened is he went into full 5-year-old daddy can kick your daddy's ass and said, okay, so listen. I've already warned everybody. The militia's there in Lexington. Yeah. You shouldn't go to Lexington because you go to Lexington, they're going to kick your ass. Like, I'm warning you, don't go to Lexington. Why would you go to Lexington? We're there.
This is also a guy who hasn't been told no a lot in his life and hasn't had a lot of consequences for his actions, I would imagine. And so, of course, he surrenders and thinks nothing bad is going to happen to him. And, you're too late. I'm going to come out on the right side of things, and boy was he right.
Yeah, he's gonna be right because white privilege
songs and poems and books and everything, like,
it's about ready to take over for him.
American legend.
On their way to Lexington, the British heard gunshots and asked Revere, "What the fuck is going on, buddy?" And he goes, I told you you're in for it now. That's the alarm shots. Daddy's gonna kick your daddy's ass. As they get closer to Lexington, they start hearing the bells ringing. And Revere says, and I quote, "The bells ringing, the town's alarmed, and you're all dead men."
So okay, so they have him. They've captured him, and they're marching with him
to Lexington to go get Samuel Adams.
And so he's just a jackass laughing in the back, telling him, "How did he not get shot?"
Well,
did they have to take him alive or something? Was that like a command? Or?
Well, maybe, because at this point, when the bells are ringing and the gunshots are going off and drums are banging, the British patrol, which is like 5 dudes, they're like, yeah, we're not equipped for this. So Revere, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take your gun and your horse, and we're gonna bounce and warn the regular British that are coming up that, hey, you actually are coming into a shitstorm, so be warned. And Revere, you go do whatever you want to go do. We're done. And by do whatever you want to do, Revere is going to wind his way up into a pub, and over the next hour is going to be retrieving a trunk full of Hancock's papers in a pub. For an hour. Retrieving papers.
Okay, to be fair, he probably went and asked the pub owner for the papers, and he said, "Oh, well, they're in the back. I'll have to go get those. Why don't you sit down?" And he probably had a beer or two, you would imagine.
Or 10.
He's been through a lot, and had to wait for those papers.
Once after retrieving this trunk successfully, he walks out of the pub
very stably,
very soberly, and here's the shot heard around the world, where the Lexington troops, the colonial militia, starts engaging the British, or vice versa, however you want to look at it. Either way, British soldiers square off with colonial militia, and shots are fired. Who knows who shot the first shot? We totally shot the first shot, but who shot the first shot?
Well,
and then
quick question:
war's on.
How they know which of the gunshots being fired off was the one that was engaging battle?
Because there was definitely
and not
a volley.
Ones that were warning.
Right?
Everybody, it's just there's guns and noise and everything.
Paul Revere hears the gunshots, and he's like, there's a battle going on. He drunken meanderedly stumbles in that direction, where he winds up finding Hancock, and they he helps Adams and Hancock retreat from the city, which there's already a battle going on from.
This is how fortuitous that they just keep finding, like, it makes the old world seem like there must have been 50 people there total if they're gonna be able to find them. Like I go to the state fair, and even with phones, I can't find my
people,
family if we get separated.
Yeah, that's true. Well, anyways, fortuitous of him. By the way, like I said, Prescott was the only one to make it to Concord and warn the city. But again, moot point, because the whole arm and muster thing had done it for him.
Everything else, they're warning, like, "Hey guys, they're coming." They're like, "Yeah, we heard the bells and gunshots and drums."
But to get the message farther out to other towns that weren't necessarily in earshot of Lexington and Concord, you do need a rider. Enter Israel Bissell.
Israel
Bissell.
Yes.
Bissell. So he was a post rider for the colonists and a patriot. So he was mailman. Just think of your local post office guy. Your post.
So he was a dude that could ride a horse, and because back then I assume post was delivered from town to town on horse and buggy, or just if it did they have an express where you could just get a guy on a horse to take you?
Yeah.
Like in Red Dead Redemption, they do.
That's your initial post office kind of stuff. Just some dude on the horseback delivering mail.
Give him some money and he'll take it.
There he goes. After the events of Lexington that morning and Concord that morning, where shots were ringing out, and over the next whole day, like, the militia is going to chase the British all the way back to the sea, basically.
Hey, all right, okay. But in case that didn't happen, and they brought 5,000 instead of 500, other cities need to be warned.
Yeah, you're right there on the money with that one, Johnny. Anyway, so Bissell's you're right on the money with that. They bring a lot more troops. Anyway, so
beyond that initial 500, that was just the tip.
That's just the tip, so to speak. So as the shots ring out from the initial battle on the 19th, Bissell's going to ride 4 days, 6 hours, covering 345 miles, literally shouting to arms, the war has begun.
Oh.
In addition to riding
how many miles?
345 miles on horseback
345 miles
over 4 days and 6 hours. While writing that, he does have orders from General Joseph Palmer, which these orders are basically a copied letter that says, on this day, British engaged militia troops and fired upon the militia troops unprovoked. Okay, totally unprovoked. And war has basically been, war's on, guys. Not declared because there's no country to declare it, but war's
right.
On.
But yeah, we're fighting now. The gloves are off. We threw down the gloves, and now it's go time.
He would, in addition to stopping at each stop, he would distribute a copy that's like the local paper or whatever would just copy that
right.
letter down and then print it off for the newspapers. Yep. Which one big reason why we don't know who the hell Israel Bissell is because they kept spelling his name wrong in these papers.
I mean, it's not that hard to spell, but no, the real reason we don't is because.
The poem wasn't written about him.
You write a powerful poem about a dude named Israel Bissell. There's this. It's just all soft consonants and
there's nothing big about that. So he would ride from Watertown, Massachusetts, to Philadelphia along the Old Post Road. During the first part of his journey, he'd actually ride the horse too hard and too fast. The horse would collapse and die up from underneath them, so he'd have to get their horse replaced.
Gotta get a new horse
to continue the rest of his journey.
Does he have the power just to commandeer a horse? Are there post office horses that he can just go and pick a new one up at the local post office?
Maybe. A lot of Bissell is legend. There was some speculation that he never even existed, but he sure as shit did because we do have his military records. We know where the guy's buried. Like he did exist. He did do this.
It's just whether or not this was.
Whether or not he lost a horse or not.
Okay.
But he did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is what happens when you start exaggerating things in history. Is no one's gonna believe you.
So
keep doing it.
I can't tell you. My speculation is that there was a friendly militia member who gave him a horse. That would be my speculation.
That would make sense. And it seems at this time everybody was kind of on one side, and so I would imagine even if he was went up to a local farmer who had a horse, he's like, hey, I need to borrow your horse to warn of this war that's happening. They might be okay with that.
Maybe there were some loyalists that weren't, but anyways,
dirty redcoats on our own ground.
Yeah, dirty redcoats on our own ground. Yep, sure shit was a lot of that going on. After the ride, he's going to join the Connecticut Army alongside, and I said Connecticut, not Continental. He's going to go back and join the Connecticut militia alongside his brother Justice Bieber.
What?
That's a joke. I just wanted to make it funny.
I thought
see how much you were paying
Justice
attention.
Bissell, right?
Justice Bissell, not Justice Bieber, but that's
I thought you said Justice Beaver, and I thought maybe he changed his name because he was a beaver hunter or something. That seemed reasonable for the days.
I was going off of the beaver. Well, anyways. In addition to Bissell, there was also a 16-year-old female rider by the name of Sybil Luddington, who was dispatched by her father on April 26th from Kent to Farmers Mills, Connecticut.
All right, honey, time to go. You're
time
16.
to go.
Get the hell out of here.
You know these roads. You can ride.
I know why we don't know about her.
Yeah, because she's a woman. Yeah, because a 16-year-old girl at that point. To attempt to save the town of Danbury, Connecticut was her goal. Like Danbury, Connecticut, the British were going there. Her goal was to go from Kent to Farmers Mills to get up as many men as they can to form a defense. The men that she did recruit.
So she's gathering people as she goes.
Yeah, she's gathering people to go to fight.
Hey, they're coming. Yeah. We need you to fight. Get your gun. Come on up.
The men she did recruit were a little bit too late because as they approached the town, it was already set aflame by the British. Here's your setting shit aflame.
There it is. That's what they do. Why? It's such a dick move.
Probably shouldn't do that. If there were loyalists in that town, they're sure shit not now after you burn their
hard
house.
To stay loyal although I'd argue that today certain people might stay loyal to their chosen one, even if they burned their house down in front of them.
Yeah, probably.
And people are crazy. So
historic hindsight is apolitical. That's my daily reminder.
I wasn't talking about anybody specific. I was very general with my terms.
I know. I'm just.
If you're going to assign certain people to that, that's on you, and you need to look inside yourself, Tommy, and see how just apolitical you are.
Oh, I'm not. but that's fine. Anyways, her ride itself would actually be double that of Paul Revere's, but history still forgets about her. She rode 40 miles versus Paul Revere's around 20. So anyways, so where do we get? So legend. Why Paul Revere? Why do we talk about him? It is all thanks to one man, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Before this guy came along, the writer. Before he came along, nobody gave a shit about Paul Revere. Nobody gave a shit about Paul Revere. But in 1861, as he's writing this new poem, there's a little bit of something going on that if you follow our podcast, you know that there's a war going on, a civil war.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And maybe it might be the time that we want some American folk heroes.
We need some patriotism.
And so maybe we're going to write some poems for some patriotism, some American folk heroes.
Okay.
So Henry Wadsworth Longfellow writes Paul Revere's Ride in 1861, 40 years after Paul Revere himself dies.
40
years after Paul Revere
40.
dies.
Okay, I'm like, hold up.
40
How
years
old was Paul Revere?
40 years after Paul Revere dies. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow did his due diligence and did historical research, but he was out to make a propaganda piece, and he says, I took a lot of liberties with this story because Israel Bissell doesn't sound like a good name that I can rhyme with, so we got rid of him. And Dansworth, he doesn't sound like a good name to rhyme with, so I got rid of him.
Paul
Donsworth,
Revere.
Paul Revere sounds good, so let me tell you
Paul's
a story about
a good, strong
Paul
biblical
Revere.
name.
So he took a lot of poetic licensures out and just ran with it. And ever since then, we now know of Paul Revere's Midnight Ride,
And instead of teaching the American students that a poem was written for these purposes because for propaganda or whatever, and that
much
what
better
actually
story.
happened, all we did was teach them that this poem that was written for propaganda was fact.
It was fact,
and it's what happened.
And it's not what happened. Paul Revere neither saw the lights in the lighthouse. He did not ride around going, the British are coming. He did not ring bells or shoot muskets. His goal was to warn Samuel Adams and John Hancock specifically that the British were coming. And by British, I mean regulars.
Us.
We're coming. The militia, the military is coming to arrest you. And then he got arrested on his way, blabbed his mouth like a little child, got drunk in a pub, and drunkenly stumbled into the Battle of Lexington.
Happened to find
Hancock again and help him escape.
Probably because they were like towards the back of the happenings.
Happening. I'm sure. Yeah,
they weren't in the thick of it.
And that's the true story of Paul Revere. I hope you all have a good rest of your 4th if you're watching this on the day it releases.
That's it for this week in Historic Hindsight. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and join us next week when we talk about submarines.